Hey there, 6th grade. This is the last video in our unit over fractions. In this video, we're just going to take a look at a few word problems, this time those that involve multiplication and division. Remember back to our decimals unit when we had some multiplying and dividing word problems. You need to ask yourself for each of these problems, do you know the total? Because that will usually tell you whether you need to multiply or divide in the problem. If the answer is yes, you do know the total, then usually that's going to be a division problem. If the answer is no, and you don't know the total, then usually that means that this is going to be a multiplication problem. So we'll look at a few examples here, and then you'll do some practice the next time you're in class. So read example 1 along with me. It says that one pitcher holds 1 3/4 of a gallon of lemonade. How much lemonade will there be altogether if 5 1/2 pitchers are filled? Well, just like the last video we did over word problems, we're going to start out by making this problem simpler. So it says that a pitcher holds 1 3/4 of a gallon of lemonade. So instead of 1 3/4, I'm just going to make this number 2. One pitcher holds 2 gallons of lemonade. And then the next fraction I see is how much lemonade will there be altogether if 5 1/2 pitchers are filled. So instead of 5 1/2, I'll go ahead and I'll just say 6. So now read this problem with these simpler numbers. One pitcher holds 2 gallons of lemonade. How much lemonade will there be altogether if 6 pitchers are filled? Well, for this problem, since we're supposed to find the total and we don't know it, we need to multiply 2 gallons of lemonade per pitcher times 6 pitchers. And our answer here would be 12. So now we're going to do the same thing with the actual numbers from our problem. So instead of 2 gallons, we know that a pitcher holds 1 3/4 of a gallon. So that would be the mixed number 1 3/4. And then it says that we're going to use 5 1/2 pitchers, not 6. So we're going to take that times 5 1/2. So this is a multiplication problem. The first thing I need to do is make my mixed numbers improper fractions. 1 3/4 becomes 7 over 4. And then 5 1/2 becomes 11 over 2. So I'm going to do 7 times 11 over 4 times 2. And because I can't cancel anywhere, I'll just multiply straight across. 7 times 11 is 77. And then 4 times 2 is 8. So I get the improper fraction 77/8. Now I want to change that to a mixed number by dividing. 8 will go into 77 9 whole times, and you get a remainder of 5. So the answer here is 9 5/8. Now let's go ahead and write this in a sentence with labels. So we could say for this problem that there will be 9 5/8 gallons in all. Okay, now let's look at example 2 and read that one along with me. It says that a bathtub holds 43 3/4 gallons of water. How many 2 1/2 gallon buckets can be filled with that much water? So let's make these numbers simpler. Instead of 43 3/4, let's say 44. And instead of 2 1/2, let's just say 2. So now read the problem. It says that a bathtub holds 44 gallons of water. How many 2-gallon buckets can be filled with that much water? Well, in this problem, we know the total amount of water. The total is 44. So since we know the total, we're going to divide. We'll take our total, 44, divided by 2. That's the amount that each bucket will hold. So that's what we're going to do for this problem, divide. Now let's replace those simpler numbers with the original numbers from the problem. So instead of 44, we had 43 3/4. And instead of 2, we had 2 1/2. So this problem is 43 3/4 divided by 2 1/2. So the first thing we need to do is make our improper fractions, mixed numbers, improper fractions. And so we'll do that for 43 and 3/4. 43 times 4 is 172, and then if I add 3 to that, I get 175. So this becomes 175 over 4. And now I'm dividing this by 2.5, which as an improper fraction would be 5/2. Because this is a division problem, I need to change flip. So I'll keep my first fraction. I'll change my division to multiplication, and I'll flip my 5/2 to the reciprocal 2/5. So now I have 175 times 2 over 4 times 5. I can do some canceling in this problem. 2 and 4 will cancel to 1 and 2. And then 5 and 175 will also cancel. 5 will go into 5 once, and it will go into 175 35 times. So now I have 35 times 1, which is 35, over 2 times 1, which is 2. And so to make this a mixed number, I need to divide by 2. And I get 17 with a remainder of 1, so that's 17 and 1/2. So let's put that answer in a sentence with labels. We could say that 17 and 1/2 buckets can be filled. Okay, example 3. This problem says that Luca has 15 and 3/4 yards of fabric. He is going to use 2/3 of the fabric to make a banner. How much of the fabric will be used for the banner? Okay, first of all, let's make these numbers a little bit easier. Instead of 15 and 3/4, let's say 16 yards. And instead of using 2/3, let's say he's going to use 1/2. Now read the problem. It says that Luca has 16 yards of fabric. He is going to use half of the fabric to make a banner. How much of the fabric will be used for the banner? Well, for this problem, if he's starting with 16 yards and he's going to use half of that, we could take 16 times 1/2. Half of the banner, half of that amount of fabric would be 8, and 16 times 1/2 gives us 8. So it makes sense to multiply in this case. We're going to multiply 16 times 1/2 to find the total amount that he'll use for the banner. So now let's replace those numbers with the actual numbers. So the actual numbers were 15 and 3/4. And then instead of using half of the fabric, he's going to use 2/3. So I'm going to multiply this by 2/3. So now I need to make 15 and 3/4 an improper fraction. That would be 63 over 4. And then 2/3 I can leave alone. So I'll do 63 times 2 over 4 times 3. I can cancel my 2 and my 4 to get a 1 and a 2. And I can cancel my 3 and 63 to get a 1 and a 21. So this is 21 times 1 over 2 times 1. So I get 21 over 2. 2 will go into 21 10 whole times with a remainder of 1. So this is 10 and 1/2. So writing our answer in a sentence with labels, we could say that 10 and 1/2 yards of fabric will be used. Okay, our last example, number 4, asks how many 1/4 pound hamburger patties can be made from an 11.5 pound package of ground beef. So let's replace those numbers with some easier numbers. Let's say how many 2-pound hamburger patties can be made from a 12-pound package of ground beef. Well, in this case, we know the total amount of ground beef we have. We have 12. So if we only have 12 pounds, and we want to make all of that ground beef into 2-pound hamburger patties, we need to take the 12 and we need to divide it by 2. So this is a division problem. 12 divided by 2. Now let's replace those numbers with what we were actually given. Instead of 12 pounds, we have 11.5 pounds, and we're dividing that 11.5 pounds into 1/4 pound hamburger patties. So we're dividing by 1/4 for this problem. So for the division problem, we need to rewrite 11.5 as an improper fraction. That would be 23 over 2. So this is 23 over 2 divided by 1/4. And now since this is a division problem, I need to change, flip. So I'll keep 23 halves. I'll change the division to multiplication, and I'll flip 1/4 to 4 over 1. So now I have 23 times 4 over 2 times 1. I can cancel 2 and 4 to get a 1 and a 2. And so now I have 23 times 2, which is going to be 46 over 1 times 1, which is 1. And 46 over 1 just becomes the whole number 46. So that means that 46 patties can be made. Okay, if you had any questions over the problems in this video, make sure you have those questions written down for the next time. And until then, have a nice day. You're all wonderful people.